DawgNation, it is great, and I mean great, to be playing a home game once again. Hello, everybody. I'm Brandon Adams, the host of DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. And as you can see, we are back here in our home, our studio. I don't look very good today, but I'm at least back where we are used to being. We're very excited about an episode of our program today. A lot to get into. David Green's going to be with us for a special reason. We'll tell you about that coming up about 35 minutes from right now. And former friend, I guess now turned enemy, Mike Johnson, going to be with us also. Listen, the relationship that I've enjoyed with him has taken a very different turn now based on what's going to happen on Monday as these two teams get ready for the national championship. My Georgia Bulldogs, his alma mater, the Alabama Crimson Tide. So it's a lot of fun. Obviously, we've got so much on the Rose Bowl, and you know the drill. A national championship as well. I can't wait to get into it all as DawgNation Daily begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So I have a tiny confession I want to make to you. I still am not sure that I can remember every big play that happened in the Rose Bowl on Monday. I've done like radio interviews and various media appearances since the game, and I'll be asked questions about these pivotal plays in the game, and when I hear the question, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right, that happened. Oh, yeah, that happened. And you try to piece all this together. I just arrived back, as we record this here on Wednesday, I just arrived back into the state of Georgia early on Wednesday morning, so I look, by the way, if you're watching on video, terrible today. I mean, I look absolutely like microwave death. So if you're a radio listener or a podcast listener, you are the lucky one today because you don't have to see my unshaven face, my sort of unkempt hair. I am kind of I'm a pretty big mess today, but I'm nonetheless really excited about being here on DawgNation Daily and really kind of looking ahead to the national championship game on Monday against Alabama, continuing to look back to the Rose Bowl victory for Georgia against Oklahoma. When I arrived to my desk here at DawgNation World Headquarters today, waiting for me right there on my desk, somebody had taken and put this copy of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution with the headline, Comeback Dogs in the 54-48 final, and the great scene there of Kirby Smart, the Georgia players, with those DawgNation field editions there on the field and the confetti coming down. And, that was such a cool moment and another great souvenir for me to sort of celebrate that and kind of think back on that. And by the way, when Georgia beat Oklahoma on Monday, apparently it wasn't just Georgia fans that were celebrating. This is actually a little bit of a surprise to me, but I think it sets us up for what a really fun conversation is going to be on the next few days getting ready for the Alabama Crimson Tide, because apparently Alabama fans, upon seeing Georgia win, they were actually a little happier than you might think. Happy even for Georgia, maybe. The SEC Network captured this on video, put it on Twitter. Here are some Alabama fans celebrating Georgia's win by doing what a lot of SEC fans do, giving you the SEC chant here. Here is the scene at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome in New Orleans after the Georgia win. Watch this on video. If you're listening on the audio version of our show, listen carefully for the chants of SEC coming from New Orleans here. So for me, as I said, that's a little bit of a surprise. You would think that Alabama fans would be too wrapped up in their own stuff. You know, we sort of think about this sometimes being a bit of a narcissistic fan base. You think they'd be too wrapped up in their kind of own situation to be happy for Georgia, but apparently that's what they were. Apparently they were happy for Georgia, and apparently they do take some pride in the ability, and at that point it would have been potential for Alabama, but the chance to be a part of an all-SEC national championship game. Now listen, here on DawgNation Daily, and I know for the Alabama folks over at SEC Country as well, we're not going to be as focused in on the SEC versus SEC storyline and how the SEC compares to other conferences. That's for all the losers who are not playing for the national championship to worry about. For the two teams that are in the national championship, they're obviously going to be more focused on each other and how if you're Georgia, how you win this game, or if you're Alabama, how you hold off Georgia. That's going to be the bigger issue for us here on this show. It's not going to be how the SEC stacks up with the rest of the conferences, but clearly there's a bit of bragging rights associated with both teams in the national championship game being in the SEC. Even an otherwise sort of lackluster bowl season, two teams in the national championship, you can't hardly beat that. In fact, when Kirby Smart met with the media yesterday, when he sort of shared some of his opening thoughts on what he thinks about as he thinks towards the college football playoff national championship game on Monday, one of the things that he mentions is the idea that both these teams hail from the same league. Here's Georgia coach Kirby Smart.
Our transition has occurred kind of through the night. We were able to fly back last night after the game. Took some time getting out of LAX and got back into Atlanta and got the buses back over to Athens. We got a little nap in and then back to work today, beginning on what I know and respect is a really good football team in Alabama, and looking forward to an opportunity to play for a national championship in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. And I think it says a lot about our conference and the competitive nature of it for two teams to come together and to play that are from the same conference and have put themselves in a situation to do something really special.
So for me, I'm not as fixated right now on the fact that both Georgia and Alabama are from the SEC. I'm more fixated on if Georgia's going to win a national championship, and I was actually on with our friends at 960 The Ref in Athens this morning, and I made this point on the radio program today. But if Georgia's going to win a national championship, and you want the kind of opponent that gives you sort of a leave-no-doubt mentality, if you want the kind of win that validates you more than any other could, beating Alabama is that. There is something about beating Alabama that is sort of its own national championship. It's almost just as coveted a victory over the Crimson Tide as a national championship trophy itself. So for me, that's what's more interesting here. Not the fact that both Georgia and Alabama are from the SEC, but the fact that Georgia gets to finish its season by going up against the ultimate measuring stick in the sport and maybe getting a victory here over the Crimson Tide. That's what I think is sort of crucial and important. However, I will acknowledge something here, that there is a concern, I think, for Georgia, and a legitimate one. I don't think this is coach speak from Kirby Smart. I don't think this is the kind of thing that you just sort of worry about so you can have something to worry about. I think what Georgia went through, 54-48 against Oklahoma, we've read the stories about this. We've rewatched the game on television maybe. For those of you who were there, you've relived those memories. A lot of you kind of go on social media and you kind of find those, I think of them almost like, Zapruder film style fan videos. They're sort of shot in the stands. You're trying to watch as many of those as you can. I was shooting my own of like the Red Coat Band and stuff on Monday. You relive all of that, and the reason why you do is because there's so much emotion attached to it. But that emotion, while it was great to enjoy on Monday, becomes a little bit of a problem on Tuesday. When you're all bleary-eyed flying back to Georgia, the Georgia team, coaches, and players themselves, all of a sudden that emotion becomes a little bit of a burden, because you got to be able to put that in your rearview mirror here and sort of reach down, grab something deep from the reservoir here, and kind of get up with that same level of emotion for the Alabama game on Monday. And believe it or not, that may be a little easier said than done. If you don't believe me, hear what Kirby Smart had to say about that.
Our team's really excited. Very emotional game last night, which concerns me, and talked to the players immediately afterwards about not burning any more energy or emotion on that game and moving on. Alabama had a little more sound victory, so they probably didn't burn quite as much emotion, although I know it was emotional to beat a team that beat them last year. And the focus moving forward will be on preparing for Alabama and what's a great program Coach Saban's got.
I mean, I don't think this is, coach speak. I don't think this is whining. I don't think this is complaining. I think this is just something close to an objective fact. Alabama won a game in New Orleans and went back to Tuscaloosa. That's within the same time zone. That's central time zone to central time zone. That's a little easier. And Alabama, to its credit, also kind of handled Clemson in that game. There's a bit of ease with which Alabama kind of finishes off that and gets ready for the national championship game. Georgia obviously got all it wanted from Oklahoma. That was obviously the kind of barroom brawl that lasted right up until the final minute. You didn't know who was going to win that game. And I do think that that there is a part of Georgia that almost can't help but be left in Pasadena, California after something like that's over with, and getting back going on the practice field this week, getting that same edge, that same level of competition back. I do think it may take a little time. I think the plane flight's a long one. I think the emotion expended is real here. I think the short week, given the fact that you played on Monday, you're going to be playing again on Monday. You have the long travel time mixed into that. I think the emotional, physical injury recovery, the sort of typical stuff at the beginning of a football week, I think that's all made more difficult because of what Kirby just described there. So as we think about what Georgia's going to be doing in its preparation for the national championship, I think the short week, the emotion sort of laid on the line there in Pasadena, I think that's going to be a real part of this game here. But one way or another, obviously Georgia's probably going to figure this out and be just fine when it's all said and done. And frankly, the emotion that Georgia has coming off the Rose Bowl victory is well earned here. I mean, we've all said this. We spent a good bit of time on yesterday's sort of special edition, slightly different episode of DawgNation Daily from Los Angeles, one final time for us yesterday. We talked about how, this is going to rank among the all-time great Rose Bowls, maybe the single greatest game in Georgia football history, maybe even jumping ahead of things like Hobnail Boot and 1980 Georgia-Florida. This Rose Bowl on the first day of 2018 may leap ahead of all of that. So the emotion that comes from this is a well-earned sense of emotion, and it probably doesn't happen. The celebration, the joy, the happiness, you probably don't get that if it wasn't for a much different defensive performance from Georgia in the second half against the Sooners than it was in the first half. This, Baker Mayfield and Oklahoma moving the ball with ease in the game's first 30 minutes, basically getting anything that they wanted. The second half, it was a little bit more about the Georgia dominance and a little bit more like what Georgia fans would have sort of hoped to have seen for the entire game. Well, we finally got that in the second half. What made things different? When Kirby Smart met with the media yesterday to kind of set up the national championship game, here were his thoughts on why the final two quarters in the overtime were better for Georgia than the first two quarters had been.
We got more pressure. We called the game a little more aggressively. I thought the kids tackled a little better. We still didn't tackle real good in the second half, but it was better than we did in the first half. I really just think they settled down. It's hard to put a finger on why they weren't settled early. I know you could say, well, it was the Rose Bowl. Well, it was Baker Mayfield. Yeah, we knew all that. And our team has got to play big in big moments and can't play what we call rat trap and have mental errors. And I thought in the first half, man, we had a lot of mental errors and just really not indicative of who we are defensively. And I thought they did a much better job of playing our style of defense. And it was not a lot of schematic changes as much as it was getting more comfortable with what Oklahoma was doing.
The one thing that Kirby Smart does not say there, which I think he could have said, was this is also a Georgia team that stayed patient. It's easy to think in a first two quarters when Oklahoma's just moving the football, kind of punctuated by the double reverse, the throwback to Baker Mayfield, that sort of symbolic moment that Oklahoma was going to make it easy against Georgia that day. And it's easy to think in those moments that Georgia's never going to get a stop against Oklahoma. But the truth is 60 minutes is actually kind of a long time. And there are lots of opportunities to get stops against Oklahoma, and Georgia stayed patient. And Kirby doesn't use that word there, but I think that there is a sense in which that word is pretty appropriate here. Georgia stayed patient defensively and started collecting stops later on in the game, later on in the second half. And at first it didn't seem like much, but it builds towards something. And all of a sudden, Georgia is getting after Mayfield, and I don't necessarily believe in momentum. I'm not sure that's a thing, but certainly there was the creation of something that looked an awful lot like momentum based on the way the Georgia defense was playing. So, challenges getting ready for Alabama here on what's kind of a short week. Still a lot of joy and happiness over the win against Oklahoma. I got to tell you, I am so excited to be back here in Atlanta for DawgNation Daily. We're going to have a great, great week. Leading up to Monday, a national championship game. I mean, y'all, this is what we dreamed of when we started this program, a chance to have the kind of conversation like we're going to have this week. I am so glad to have you with us and look forward to doing a whole lot more with you in the days to come. So I will say that, as I say every day, that my name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. And Facebook Live, of course, you watched us in Los Angeles for the last few days. You see us back here in our home, as I said a few moments ago, kind of a home game for us here once again. I am really thankful to have Hannah Michael back in the room with me and be back home in our comfortable, friendly confines here. It's really good to be doing DawgNation Daily with you once again from the place that we always do it and deliver the kind of show that we've come to expect here each and every day. Really, really fun there in that regard. By the way, I want to tell you about something else. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to have our Marlowe's Big Game Preview. We're going to be live at the Marlowe's in Brookhaven from 6 to 8 p.m. That's tomorrow. That's Thursday, January 1st, 6 to 8 p.m. Marlowe's in Brookhaven for our DawgNation Big Game Preview. The address is, for those of you who are listening on our radio program or our podcast, 3575 Durden Drive. That's 3575 Durden Drive for the Marlowe's in Brookhaven. We're going to be there from 6 to 8 p.m. We're going to celebrate a Rose Bowl college football playoff win. We're going to look ahead at the Alabama Crimson Tide and talk about how Kirby Smart can become the first former Saban assistant to beat his old boss. That's going to be a great conversation. Welcoming in a special guest for that, former Georgia quarterback David Green, going to be with us there tomorrow night at the Marlowe's in Brookhaven for our DawgNation Big Game Preview. And by the way, David will be with us here in just a moment to offer a preview of the Big Game Preview tomorrow night, the Marlowe's in Brookhaven. So I hope you can make plans for that. I will also tell you this. It's time for our Simply Smarter Game Planning. It's brought to you by Aldi. And for our Simply Smarter Game Planning today, I want to take a look at something that Dennis Dodd from CBS Sports said. Dodd was actually a little critical of not Georgia's game plan because Georgia wins the game, but the criticism coming from the Oklahoma side of things. Dodd says that Georgia got off easy. He says the best ever college football playoff semifinal should have at least still be going on. I don't know if he means all the way until now, but maybe going on a little longer than it did. And Dennis Dodd says it probably should have ended in Oklahoma's favor. Forget Oklahoma blowing a 17-point lead or failing to adapt to Georgia's second-half adjustments. Georgia got off easy because Oklahoma coach Lincoln Riley got conservative late in the fourth quarter and overtime with the game in the balance when it counted most. And I actually don't necessarily agree with Dennis Dodd's assessment on all this. I think the better description of what happened here is not that that Lincoln Riley started doing something wrong. It's just sort of hard to score on every single drive. And, you know, the country wanted to turn Lincoln Riley into an offensive genius at the beginning of the game because Oklahoma's moving the football, and certainly he's a top-flight play caller, but he was never going to score every single time. And Georgia was going to score enough points to keep this thing close, and once Georgia found a way to start locking things down, obviously the chance of winning the game, moved on and became a little more accessible there for Georgia. So the real issue here is the fact that Georgia stays patient. That was working in its favor, and I think that Dennis Dodd's assessment that Georgia got off easy because of a mistake by Lincoln Riley, I don't necessarily think that's the case. But that is our Simply Smarter Game Planning brought to you by Aldi, the home of Simply Smarter shopping. By the way, you can now get your groceries delivered via Instacart. Check that out at your local Aldi. Simply Smarter Shopping Aldi. They bring you the Simply Smarter Game Planning here on DawgNation Daily. All right, I said this before. He was our former friend. Is he our enemy now? We'll find out as we welcome in the Alabama alumnus, Mike Johnson, here to DawgNation Daily. And for the first time in a while here, I will say hello to my buddy and my partner from AT&T SEC Country Live. It has been a month of Sundays since he and I have hosted that show together. We'll look forward to being back together on that front soon, though. Mike, first of all, Happy New Year. Congratulations to your team, the Sugar Bowl victors, the Alabama Crimson Tide, earning a spot in the national championship game against Georgia. It is quite a moment for these two SEC schools, is it not?
It definitely is, man, and I think I'm like a lot of people that made the trip to New Orleans and Pasadena. I'm still shaking out the cobwebs, but I know you guys had a blast out there. I hope it was as awesome in Pasadena as I built it up to be, and I had a heck of a time down in New Orleans. It just the Cinderella story continues for both of these teams.
Yeah, I said this at the top of the show today. My confession is I'm still trying to piece together all the big moments that happened in the game. I haven't had a chance to go back and rewatch the entire thing yet, and you have these conversations and different moments placed in the game pop up, and you're like, oh yeah, that did happen. Oh yeah, that was crucial in this game. And there's so many things you want to remember, especially in Georgia's game, because the game itself had a lot of plays and a lot of them were consequential. But I'm sure you kind of feel the same way in the aftermath of trying to get back home and get settled in. For a lot of our audience, they're trying to get settled back into work on a day like this. In the aftermath of all that, remembering almost everything that happened is actually a pretty difficult thing to do.
It definitely is. I was trying to piece it back in my head this morning, and I think I'm like a lot of you guys. I was traveling back home yesterday, so it's not like you get on and watch a bunch of highlight shows or do any of that stuff. I'm thinking back on Deron Payne's touchdown, the big man touchdown. I'm thinking back on Anthony Jennings' injury. I'm running it back in my head. How did Jalen Hurts play, really? I mean, I was there celebrating the throws he made, but I wasn't living and dying with the ones he didn't. I think there's a lot of that going on. Checking box scores, looking at, rushing game statistics. A lot of eye-popping statistics out there in Pasadena. And, I just got to tell you a quick story. I'm headed into the Superdome down there in New Orleans, and I can't tell you, everybody in line had these new, Sling TV or YouTube TV apps on their phone, and everybody's holding up their smartphones so that everybody else behind them can watch the Rose Bowl as we wait through the security lines and head up into the stadium. And it was a heck of a scene. Everybody in line down at the security going into the Superdome is living and dying with every play that's happening out in Pasadena. It just an incredible night all around for college football and in particular the SEC.
I said this, that you were our former friend, now turned enemy. Obviously, we don't think that's true. This game's not going to come between you and me. It's not. But I am excited about seeing our two teams kind of match up with each other on Monday. You mentioned those Sling TVs and all those apparatuses that are being used to watch the game. I'm sure you didn't get to see the entire game. I'm sure you saw some of the plays, but what was your overall thought about what you saw from Georgia on Monday?
Well, my first takeaway, at halftime, I think, is when a lot of people started heading towards the direction of going in the Superdome for the Sugar Bowl. And I remember that there was some eye-popping stats on both sides. First of all, the rushing yards for Georgia, not particularly at halftime, but definitely at the end of the game, you're looking there going, man, wow, that's a heck of a job. But then I did not expect Oklahoma to have as much of an effect with their rushing game. I think Anderson had about 200 yards rushing on the ground, and I thought at some point that Georgia's defense and their speed would show through, but you got to give credit to Oklahoma and what they were able to do with Lincoln Riley and Baker Mayfield. Their offense showed up in a big way, and I had no idea that game would turn into a shootout. I thought it would be more of a slugfest than a shootout, and probably I thought it would look more like the Alabama-Clemson game, but it was interesting to me the way in which Georgia won. The fact that they're able to put their offense up against the reigning Heisman Trophy winner and come out victorious in a shootout style of a game is just something I don't think a lot of people expected, but I know Georgia fans will take it any way that it's going to come.
We talked earlier about something that Kirby Smart had said, and the funny thing is I'd actually been saying this to some people after Monday night before Kirby Smart even said this, that it's tough to get back up emotionally, that you play a game like that, it's one of the great games that's been played. You have to fly 3,000 miles back to the state of Georgia, and replenishing the stock of emotions, even with a national championship game, maybe a little easier said than done. As a former player, I mean, what is that process like? You played in the pre-playoff era, so you didn't have to do the back-to-back grind like Georgia's going to have to do this week, but you certainly know what emotional wins feel like. Is there a challenge in sort of, regenerating that energy here this week?
There's no doubt about that. Just plain and simple, it's tough to do. And that's one of the first things I thought about was, Georgia, listen, I'm assuming they stayed the night out there and they wake up the next morning and they fly home and they get a day off to replenish. But this is not like coming back from the Rose Bowl in the way I did. I was coming back bringing a championship trophy. We were coming back with a national title. And here you have this team that's got to fly all the way back across the country. And I've never had that long of a flight or that big of a turnaround coast to coast. But, what I did deal with was big games where, we were pitted as the top team in the country and go through emotional victories. We beat LSU down in Death Valley in overtime one week, and we turned around the next weekend and we weren't very good. And I think it's not Kirby Smart. I think it's great for Georgia fans that Kirby Smart knows the route to get through these things. He knows how to deal with issues like this now because he's been through that before. But it's going to be up to these players and up to the leadership to make sure everybody's doing small things. Cold tubbing, going in there and make sure you're getting extra film work because these guys are going to be tired. There's going to be some jet lag. There's going to be some hangover. And I think it's up to these guys to mentally grind through it and understand the opportunity that lies in front of them.
So I don't want to get lost in this subject because we got a lot about this upcoming game I want to deal with. But Kirby did say something back in L.A. this past week that I thought was kind of interesting, that when y'all went out there in 2009, y'all didn't stay in downtown L.A., but Georgia obviously did. And I was at that team hotel a couple times because I had friends and family that were staying there. Let me tell you something. That place was a madhouse. I mean, and obviously the festivities all week long, whether it be the Beef Bowl or the trip to Disneyland, that's all just it's a sideshow. It's a circus tent. I mean, it's crazy. Why didn't y'all stay in L.A. and do a lot of that kind of stuff? Oh, was it because it was a BCS title game? I mean, how did you, I guess, avoid doing some of the same stuff that Georgia did this past week?
Yeah, I wish I knew. I think that obviously there was a big reason behind it with Coach Saban, and we stayed at two different sites. I'm not sure how Georgia did this past week. We stayed near the place we were practicing out there, which was Orange Coast College. We stayed there for 5 nights, I believe, right near the mall, and then we moved up the night before just to get even further away from everything. We ended up staying, I think, out in Glendale, California, or something like that, right up near Pasadena. And so it's definitely a tough task. And listen, I think that Kirby Smart will tell you that's one of the great things that he's been through it. But being able to keep that focus, and listen, I mentioned it a bunch of times on this show and on SC Country Live that in New Orleans, you worry about guys going down to Bourbon Street and doing all these things. Well, it's a little bit more spread out in California. Yeah. So we had to find ways to try to keep our mind off of going out and searching for stuff. It was like, hey, we're going to go walk through the mall, maybe get dinner at Applebee's, and I'm going to be in bed at 9 o'clock. And I think that's one of the great things about going out to California, like I mentioned before. And like you said, though, the tough turnaround and getting all those things squared away is what's up next.
Well, I think I speak for all Georgia fans when I say if Georgia players were doing something other than going to bed by 9 p.m., I don't want to know. And if they were able to keep that a secret, then good for them, I guess. Turning our attention back to Monday, though, this stat. It's going to be cited 9 million times. No former Saban assistants ever beaten Nick Saban. For me, this is about the fact that almost no coach beats Nick Saban. I don't put any extra stock in the fact that former Saban assistants haven't done it, because Saban's record against virtually all coaches is essentially undefeated because of how good Alabama's been. Am I right or wrong to not put any extra emphasis on the part about it being former Saban assistants?
I think you're definitely right about not putting any extra emphasis, because I don't know that Nick Saban's really played any assistant coaches that have had teams quite like Georgia has right now. And I think in a lot of different ways in the front seven on the offensive line, it's going to be like looking at mirror images for each other. Obviously, a couple of different dynamics on the offensive side of the ball, but I don't put any stock in it. And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if Kirby actually is the one that has the upper hand here. He knows some of these players on this team. He knows, what Nick Saban's defense does. Nick Saban, looking back across the way, he doesn't know that much about Georgia's team. He hasn't played these guys. He doesn't know them personally. So I'm with you. I don't know that I put a ton of stock in the whole assistant thing. I think there's a ton of storylines taken in this game, but that one just, for some reason, to me and most Alabama fans I've talked to, it just doesn't carry much weight. I think that everybody has a healthy respect for what Kirby Smart is as a coach, and at some point there's going to be an assistant that beats Nick Saban, I think Kirby Smart has as good a chance as anybody to do it Monday night.
I didn't get to see the entire Sugar Bowl. We were still doing a lot of our post-game coverage from Pasadena, so I didn't get to see every play, but what I did get to see, let me deal with a couple of issues that were concerning for me, from obviously speaking from the Georgia perspective here. Looks like those Alabama linebackers that are returning to health have this Alabama defense looking more like an Alabama defense again. Is that your perspective on that too?
It definitely is. I think the return of Mack Wilson was a big deal. I think that Alabama's defensive line might have had their best game of the year, honestly, when you talk about just sheer preparation. It is tough. I don't know if you caught it this morning. Anthony Jennings had to announce that he won't be playing in the national title game, underwent surgery. He got hurt, kind of that garbage time mop-up duty second half in the Sugar Bowl. So that's definitely a tough loss. Just adds to the mounting ability. I thought he had one of his best games. But when you talk about guys like Terrell Lewis, when you talk about guys like Christian Miller and Mack Wilson, being able to return from some of those injuries, it was a huge deal. Mack Wilson has become the signal caller. He's it was Sean Deion Hamilton, then it was Dylan Moses, and now you're it's a combo between Mack Wilson and Rashaan Evans. I can't understate it. It's a huge deal for this team to be able to have those guys back flying around because of the knowledge base that they have. Because you can see the preparation, even when there were misdirections, even when Clemson was trying to catch Alabama's defense off guard. There were guys flying around. There were guys near the ball. They were not taken off guard by anything, and I think that's because they're starting to get some of these players back healthy that have been through the rigors of some of these games.
The other thing that's concerning for me is the Alabama offensive line, which, it's certainly been an above-average offensive line, one of the better ones in the country, but by Alabama standards, maybe this year, it had not been what I would have thought of as a truly dominant Alabama offensive line. But the Clemson defensive line is the best in the country, and Alabama's offensive line held them and handled them fine on Monday. That's a little bit of a concern for a Georgia fan, that all of a sudden this Alabama offensive line looks like what you would expect a tied offensive line to look like.
Yeah, I definitely did, and I thought they played well. And the game plan kind of went similar to what I thought they did. And I thought Brian Dable, honestly, I think at times he has not been very opportunistic in terms of his play calling. I thought that at times you get kind of where everybody knows what's coming. But I thought he did a great job of sticking to the run. That was one of my main sticking points going into this game. I want to see guys like Damian Harris get the ball. Bo Scarborough get the ball. I think when Damian Harris did get the ball in the first half, you're able to see what he's able to do between the tackles and allow this offensive line to go to work so that you're not leaving this offensive line in third and longs. And I thought they did a great job of staying on schedule for the most part. You didn't ask Jalen Hurts to do a ton on third and long, 3rd and 15. He did make some plays with his legs, but I'm with you. I thought Alabama's push up front was a big deal. They lost Lester Cotton there in the second half. Still waiting to hear whether or not he'll be able to play this coming week. But J.C. Hassenauer takes over for him. He's a senior, and he's a good lineman as well. So I thought it was a good performance. Obviously, going to be going up against another quality front in Georgia this Monday, and I think it makes for a heck of a showdown for sure.
Here's where I think Georgia's got an opportunity, though, and I'm a brokered record on this, but what I saw from Jalen Hurts, I think, as objective as I can be, Mike, I think that's also still concerning. I guess he is like offensive player of the game or whatever, but this is still a guy that's misfiring on some throws and misfiring on some opportunities. And I think the Alabama wide receivers are a potential mismatch in favor of the Tide, but I just don't know that Jalen Hurts is going to be able to deliver them the football. If I'm thinking about reasons why Georgia might win this game, for me, Jalen Hurts is a check in Georgia's box here. How do you feel about that?
I think that's definitely a fair assessment, and I don't think there's any Alabama fan that looks at it and says he's the offensive player of the game that feels really great about that. I think what was, and the positive side of that column for Alabama fans, at least you saw Jalen Hurts having other targets in the Sugar Bowl, and obviously, I don't think you got to catch much of it, but he was targeting Irv Smith, and he was targeting, obviously, big man Deron Payne. You had balls thrown to Robert Foster. It wasn't just the Calvin Ridley show that we've seen in the past. I thought he did a great job of trying to disperse the ball. Damian Harris catches the ball. Bo Scarborough catches the ball. You try to get the ball to some of these wide receivers that are very good and allow them to make plays in open space. I thought he missed a couple receivers. The accuracy was questionable at times. There was an underthrown ball on a possible flea flicker that Calvin Ridley must have had 15 yards behind him to the nearest DB. And that one gets broken up. But I don't think he played awfully. There wasn't any glaring mistakes from him, but it's still a challenge in the passing game for Alabama to really be efficient there down in and down out. I think, for the first time this year, Alabama was really close to 50% on third down conversions, which I think is a big deal. But I still don't know if they've arrived in the passing game. But I think it's going to be a big deal for them to try to get on the board first by running the football.
Then the other thing, Mike, and I think for our video audience, we'll show some of the video that got captured on Twitter of this, of Nick Saban and Brian Dable having some words there. Saban kind of giving one of those chewings to Dable, the way that Lane Kiffin certainly became famous for being on the receiving end of those. And I'll admit what I'm about to say to you here may be a bit of wishful thinking coming from the Georgia side of things, but at the beginning of the season, I was concerned about how Dable was going to fit in as replacement for Lane Kiffin. Mike, I think back to a year ago when I thought that Saban micromanaged the Alabama offense a little too much going to that Clemson game. Now, obviously, Dable's not going to be replaced here going into Monday, but is there any fear on the Alabama side that the sort of dissatisfaction and anger that Saban briefly showed towards Dable there is an example of him kind of meddling in the offense a little too much again, much like maybe happened last year heading into the Clemson game for the national championship?
I'll be honest with you, B.A. I don't even think it's been a thought in most people's minds so far. Maybe as we start to break down this game a little bit more and understand the ins and the outs, you hear stuff like that. But this is the reason. Listen, this is the reason assistants don't talk in the media. The reason that Kirby Smart has employed a lot of the same philosophies. And this is something Nick Saban's been known for. Lane Kiffin got it. Doug Nussmeier got it. I saw Jim McElwain get it a few times. Where, you know what? As hard as Nick Saban is on the players, as much as he expects out of those guys, he's even harder on the coaching staff and expects just as much out of those guys. And I think it's all about preparation to understand where you're at. And I think Brian Dable, listen, he coached for Bill Belichick, so I think he understands kind of how that works. And I think that obviously it'll become a working relationship if it wasn't already. But they have to listen. I think that Nick Saban was right in the way he did it. I think that Brian Dable, had some mishandling of the offense at times. So I don't find it to be a storyline, a big storyline for anybody moving forward. And it's just one of those things that you deal with time in and time again from Nick Saban. I think that a lot of Alabama fans respect the fact that, hey, you know what? I'm not going to let these assistant coaches just do whatever they want. I'm going to hold them to a high standard too. And it's just something Alabama fans have learned to see.
All right, here's the story. I will not be at SEC Country Live today. I think you are back today. I'm looking forward to being back with you, though, as a part of Thursday's show as we get ready to preview the national championship. That is going to be a lot of fun, Mike. These two great programs and a great build-up for this game here coming up on Monday. I can't wait to be a part of it with you.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one, man. And I usually end these great Wednesday interviews with DawgNation by saying good luck this weekend. I'm going to refrain from that one today, BA. I think we'll let this one be decided on the field, and all luck will be handed over later.
That is fair enough, Mike. It's good of you to join us, though. We appreciate your time.
Always a pleasure, buddy.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, listen, Mike may be an Alabama guy, but he's a good sport about all of this. We always enjoy having him here today and every week here on DawgNation Daily, and fun to kind of build up towards the Alabama game and the way these two teams match up with each other. I think it's going to be really fascinating. By the way, a little less than 5 minutes from right now, we're going to talk to former Georgia quarterback David Green, not only to get Green's thoughts on what happened for Georgia in the Rose Bowl, but also to preview what's going to happen tomorrow for our Marlowe's Big Game preview. We'll be there from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Marlowe's in Brookhaven. David's going to be with us for that. We will talk to him about that coming up in just a couple moments. By the way, if you're listening to us, the address, once again, 3575 Durden Drive in Brookhaven for our Marlowe's Big Game preview, 6 to 8 p.m. tomorrow. I'll also remind you the DawgNation Daily is brought to you in part by our friends at Kroger. And if you're getting ready for a big watch party on Monday, you want that party platter for the game, Well, check out Kroger.com for that, because you're going to get big savings on your party platter to get ready for the game. Everything you need for celebrating the big one on Monday, you can find at your local Kroger. For more information, as I said, you can check out Kroger.com on that. If you're planning on going to the game, I know some of the big talk is the expensive ticket prices. I guess we've heard as high as $2,600 just to get in. I know that Darren Rovell over at ESPN had tweeted out that the one of the ticketing sites had gotten crashed because there had been so much interest and so much immediate rush on the part of Georgia fans to seek out these tickets right at the moment that that Georgia punched its ticket, no pun intended, the national championship game, that the ticketing site's website crashed. I think that there's a lot of hype about this. And by the way, if you're watching the video, you can actually see an example on the screen of the website crashing there because of the ticket demand. But my advice would be, and obviously you should consult your own financial advisor here for the situation that fits you best. These things are fact dependent after all. But I would encourage you to wait. If you're planning on going to the game, and honestly, if you're watching us right now, you want to weigh in this in the comment section, or if you want to hit me up on Twitter at DawgNation Daily, let me know your thoughts on this. From a strategic standpoint, do you really think they're going to go higher than $2,600? I mean, are they going to be $5,000? I mean, people don't have that kind of walking around money. I mean, first of all, I don't know how some of us are going to survive, given this Rose Bowl trip was not cheap. Notre Dame was not cheap. SEC championship tickets, they were expensive. And now you're talking about all-time, high water mark of expense for a national championship game ticket. I mean, listen, money's getting a little tight for a lot of us, I believe, after all of this. And I certainly know that it is for me right now. But my advice, and I mean this to the people who are definitely thinking they want to go, people who say, you know what, I definitely want to be there. My advice would be wait just a little bit, because the media gets everything wrong, right? And what the media hypes up off the top ends up being a little less true when it's all said and done. My guess is the national championship game tickets will be pretty expensive, but my guess is that they might come down a little bit by the time you get there. At least I would hope so. So you can decide for yourself on that, but I might advise you to wait just a little bit. I thought it was interesting that Alabama defensive back Tony Brown, reflecting on the Sugar Bowl, the game that Alabama wins that punches its ticket to play Georgia on Monday, sounds like if Brown's representative of the rest of the Alabama team, we may have a little bit of a problem with Dabo Swinney here. What Brown says is, he goes, I love Dabo for all the ammunition he gave this team. He gave this team a lot of ammunition to come play this game and ready to dominate every play. Told us we weren't ready. Told us they weren't worthy of being a top 4 team. Look, that's what happens when you talk trash to us. We're going to show you. Now, my understanding, in case I'm wrong here, and I have been in California, but the only trash that they talked was Dabo just voted Ohio State above Alabama in the poll. That's all this was. It wasn't anything more sinister than that. Dabo just ranked Ohio State ahead of Alabama, which is not an unreasonable opinion, but that is all it took for Tony Brown to get fired up, which just proves once again that Alabama's just like Georgia. They will use everything they can to their advantage. Was Georgia using at halftime the fact that Baker Mayfield had given the throat slash gesture and said the game was over? We know Georgia well enough to know that's probably the case, and clearly Georgia was motivated by that at the end of the game, and Alabama's going to do the same kind of stuff, and so it'll be that kind of, I guess, mental chess match between the two teams on Saturday, or I should say Monday as well. Bill Hancock, the college football playoff CEO, essentially, says that, with 2 SEC teams in the playoff and UCF going undefeated on the outside looking in, that he doesn't see any change coming in the college football playoff anytime soon. But that's the kind of controversy that's going to kind of, sort of unravel here a bit when you've got 2 SEC teams in. Some folks are going to be wondering, hey, should we expand this thing out to make room for more teams around the rest of the country? But Hancock says for now he likes the playoff just the way it is. We'll make that our SEC through. And we'll get ready to transition now to a guy that's going to be good enough to join us tomorrow for our DawgNation big game preview at the Marlows in Brookhaven. It is the former Georgia quarterback David Green. And David, first of all, let me say I'm so excited about having you with us tomorrow night at the Marlows in Brookhaven. And David, I think you're going to see a fired up bunch of Dog fans who are thrilled about not just the Rose Bowl victory, but a matchup against Alabama. This is a pretty special time to follow the red and black, is it not?
Brandon, I tell you, it's amazing. I mean, my voice, I'm still just trying to get it back from the game. I started thinking, I was like, am I crazy? Because I could barely sleep the other night after that game. I was so excited, and it was such an emotional roller coaster. It felt like the game was 10 hours long. But I tell you, the way the game started out, if you were in the room that we were in, we had about 6 families. We were over to Buddy's house. You kind of start out watching the game like normal. By the end of that game, we looked like a bunch of hoodlums out there jumping around and, yelling and screaming and the whole deal, and the kids were going nuts. It was the most fun I've ever had watching a football game, and probably the most nerve-wracking. I'll tell you, as a player, it's not near as gut-wrenching because you're playing, but as a fan, it is like torture having to sit there and watch some of these games.
So, David, we had Mike Johnson on a moment ago, and I said this to him, and I said this off the top of our show as well. It's almost difficult for me to catalog everything that happened in the game. I'm still trying to piece together my thoughts. I mean, as a former player, if you had to sum up, fairly succinctly why Georgia won, what made the second half different from the first, what was your overall sort of simple takeaway as what led to a Dawg victory there?
Well, I think getting that field goal before half was huge because it at least felt like we had a chance to get back into the game. Now, we had a lot of work, and we had to kick off to them. Whatever adjustments they made at halftime, when we came out and held them to 2 3-and-outs, and then we marched the ball down and scored, it's a totally different game. And we had the momentum. But the thing that was so impressive to me, really on both sides, both with Georgia and Oklahoma, is that momentum went back and forth a number of times in that second half. And the thing that I think most fans don't realize that players do, it's so hard to flip the momentum when you're on the losing end of it. I mean, you got to go out and you got to make a play when when the other team really has all the juice and everything going. And both teams were able to step up and just keep making big plays after big play. I mean, it was so fun to watch, and it was just, I think everybody was on the edge of the seats because right when you thought you had the momentum and you were about to take it and run with it, the other team made a huge play.
Yeah.
And the momentum swung. So I'm just not used to, and I think most people just aren't used to seeing the momentum go back and forth that many times.
And obviously, as a former quarterback, I would imagine you've got to be impressed with what you've seen from Jake Fromm. I mean, his poise and the degree to which that he doesn't allow these moments to be too big for him, I continue to be impressed by it, even though he finds a sort of a way to up the ante on that every single week. I mean, how much do you love what Jake Fromm's doing right now?
It's amazing, to be honest with you. And I almost think, when we even mention him being a freshman, it's almost doing him a disservice because he's playing great football regardless if he's a freshman or a senior. And you can tell he's just a guy, he just wins. And and the thought of failure, I don't think has ever crossed his mind. And it's so fun to watch a guy when he just competes. And the thing that you love is when he steps out on the field, you know what you're going to get. And as a quarterback, that's what you want. You want to know that you got a guy that's going to get out there. He's just going to keep grinding regardless if he goes out there and throws a pick on the first possession or if he throws a touchdown pass. He's going to keep going out there and grinding, just trying to win the game. And, I mean, it just shows, how selfless he is as well. That last play of the game, Sonny Michel's out there wide. He's over there blocking. It's just kind of that whatever it takes mentality to get the job done. And it's impressive to watch. His mental makeup is definitely his best attribute. I mean, he's a heck of a talent. He's a great football player, but you can tell the guys love to play for him. And you can tell he's got that makeup where he's just going to go out there and grind. And honestly, I've been around some of the best quarterbacks, the Bradys, the Mannings. I played with them, my little stint in the NFL. And the thing that separates the great ones from the average ones are the ones that want to compete every day. And they just can't stand losing, and they want to win. And this kid's got that kind of mental makeup.
All right, quick final thought from you. Obviously, the challenge of Alabama is a real one. I mean, I thought that Alabama – I didn't get to see the entire game against Clemson because I was in Pasadena and kind of wrapping up some of our post-game coverage. But what I did see, I saw an Alabama team that was very much in keeping with some of the better ones of the last few years here. This is a game I believe that Georgia can win, but the Crimson Tide is certainly a formidable foe, is it not?
I'm telling you, Alabama – I think Alabama's a lot better than what people think because most people, when they think of Bama this year, they think of the way they were playing at the end of November. when they were just decimated. Their linebacker, I've never seen a linebacking crew get decimated quite like they have. But I'll say this. Their front seven and the players and the talent and the depth that they have is unbelievable. I mean, we're certainly going to have our hands full. I think offensively, Jake Fromm is going to have to play unbelievable in this game, because I guarantee you, Nick Saban, every coach, we talk about it every week, every coach is going to try to take away the running game. Well, if there's any team that's capable of stopping our run, it's going to be Alabama. And I guarantee you they're going to load up the box, and they're going to commit to stopping. They're going to make Jake and Wims and Godwin, we're going to make some of those guys are going to have to make plays to beat us. He's not going to let Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, they're not going to play a two-safety look and just let those guys just run wild. So Jake's going to have a huge game, and I think Wims and Godwin are going to have chances to really step up and make some big plays.
All right, tomorrow night, 6 to 8 p.m., Marlowe's in Brookhaven. David, Marlowe's in Brookhaven's always popping with a lot of Georgia fans. It's going to be a really fun night tomorrow. 35-75 Durden Drive. I'm excited about having you there for it. Can't wait to talk to you in person about these dogs. Thanks for being with us for it.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, buddy. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Good stuff there from former Georgia quarterback David Green. Always great to have him on DawgNation Daily, and great to have him tomorrow night as well. Also great to think about 297 days from right now, Georgia maybe as the reigning national champions gets a victory over the Florida Gators. Good Georgia fans are Gator haters first and foremost. And 297 days from right now, we're going to get another victory for the Dogs over the Florida Gators. We do it every single day. The Gator Hater Countdown here on DawgNation Daily. Let me also close the show by saying this. Special thanks I want to give out to the folks at the Tournament of Roses. The hospitality that they showed for the Rose Bowl is really unmatched. And I had a chance to talk to some of their officials before I flew out of L.A. Last night. And I told them, look, here in the South, we obviously think we invented college football, and we obviously are pretty proud of our own traditions. But way out there, out west, they're doing a great job of being stewards for the sport with the Rose Bowl. I was honored to have been a part of it, and I appreciate their hospitality making it so fun. See you tomorrow right here on DawgNation Daily. And for those of you watching us on video, we will get some comments going right now. And I will tell you this. I am exhausted. So I had to fly out last night at, we left L.A. at like 8:30. That's the only flight we could get out. And I was not going to miss this show today for anything. So we had to get a flight on Tuesday that kept me in L.A. long enough to do DawgNation Daily from there, because I wanted to be able to have the post-game reaction, but I did not want to miss Wednesday's show. The only window that you could do that was to go last night at 8:30. So listen, this is going to sound like I'm complaining, and I hope it doesn't come across that way, because I couldn't be happier about the experience that I am in the midst of having right now, getting a chance to talk to y'all about this and the build up the national championship. But I am as tired as I look right now. I will say that, though. But it's a thrill to be with y'all for this, and to have a great time kind of getting ready for all that, including all your comments right now. I know we're a little late getting to the comments, so we'll dive into as many of these as we can right now. Daisuke Turakami says, time to go undefeated in Atlanta this season. Yeah, listen, that is a great thought to have right there, that the Dogs win all their games in Atlanta this season. That's fantastic. Kevin Jones says, I need to get some sleep. I appreciate the kind words, Kevin. I'll knock some of those out. Brandon Ferris says, BA, do you know how our players are feeling since they got back from Pasadena? Yeah, I can only imagine what they must have been dealing with. Kevin Blackman, a funny callback to an inside joke from the SEC Country Live days. Miriam Martin Corbin says, exhausted too, got back at midnight, home at 2 a.m., but so worth it. Yeah, it was. And I tell you what was funny. So last night, we flew from Atlanta to Salt Lake, and then from L.A. to Salt Lake to Atlanta. And obviously the whole plane was Georgia fans. And every time the plane would take off, they would call the Dogs. They do the Go Dogs signal every time the plane was going in the air. So it's like the middle of the night in Salt Lake City. I mean, we had some pretty diehard Georgia fans, but for the most part, a lot of them were kind of ready to sort of like kick back and just get a little shut eye or something. But I'm gonna give credit. There were still plenty of Georgia fans who who are still going at full speed, still giving you the Go Dogs Sick'em cheer on Tuesday night, late in the night. This morning we landed in Atlanta about 5:30 in the morning. A lot of those Georgia fans still look pretty bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. They were still having a great time. So I got to give those Dog fans credit. And for those of you who are back at work today, back at work this week, you may have worked yesterday. Best of luck to you in kind of getting through that. And I am also kind of curious to find out what our work plans are for Monday. Those of you, is this the kind of thing, can you take Monday off? Can you take Tuesday off too? Because it's going to be, that kind of day. Are you going to have to work both the days? That's one of the things I think we'll end up talking about is kind of how, because it's not a holiday. January 1st is for most people a holiday. That's a little easier to kind of navigate. The random second Monday in January is typically in most workplaces not a holiday, although around the state of Georgia that may be treated that way. Huey Clark says, my daughter pulls for Alabama. That's why she got coal for Christmas. That's pretty funny, Huey. Lee Roberts says, welcome home. I appreciate that, Lee. Spoonie Jr. says, just beat the most explosive team in college football. And, yeah, I think what Georgia's able to do in the second half against Oklahoma does, I think, justifiably give it some confidence going in the Alabama game, although Kirby Smart, when he had a chance to praise his team, did not necessarily do that for its defensive effort. He was a little disappointed in that. Monty Moon says, I got both days approved for vacation on Monday and Tuesday. That's fantastic. By the way, Diedrich Frazier catching a break. He says we got a snow day here in Savannah. Diedrich, give me some details on that, because what I heard was it was going to snow like 3 to 5 inches in Savannah. Now, it's freezing cold in Atlanta, but it's not going to snow here at all, at least I don't think. But it was supposed to snow up to 5 inches in Savannah. So I'd love to hear how exactly that worked out. Kevin Hill says took the whole week off, and yeah, I think a lot of Georgia fans were probably kind of feeling the same way, that they're not quite sure when they'll work again. They're kind of year starts on January the 1st. You have the day after celebration. You roll right into the game week against Alabama, which is all anybody can think about. The celebration after Georgia wins is going to last at least another couple days. Some of y'all may not work till February. Mark Batterson says he will be taking a vacation day just for Monday. That's probably smart. Danny Smith says, drove back to Arizona yesterday after the game. Now taking a flight back home to Arkansas. I'm off till tomorrow. Go Dogs. Danny, thanks for checking in with us on your travel there. We appreciate you allowing us to keep you company. Rhett Proctor says, how about this? Supposed to be 5 inches of snow in Waycross, Georgia. Waycross, for those of you who are not familiar, is like home of the Okefenokee Swamp. I've got to imagine it's been a long time since Waycross, Georgia, has seen 5 inches of snow. Michael Ramey asked about the uniforms. My assumption is it will be the red jerseys. Georgia is the better seeded team, so they will wear the home jerseys there, and I would say Georgia's wearing red. Somebody had a line about Nick Saban in there from the AJC. I missed that. Put that back in the comment section if you want, and I will read that one again. Dirk Mitchell going down the road. Dirk, I'm not going to read your comment because it may not be quite time to talk about that yet. But just know, Dirk, that I have thought about that. I have asked that question myself too, and y'all can scroll in your own video feed and see what Dirk asked about. I'm not going to speak those words out loud until it's time to actually speak them, but I have definitely thought about that myself. Joel Moody says, how about 6 inches of snow predicted for Hinesville? Amazing. Byron P. Walker says Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the Dogs home away from home. They can certainly turn it into that on Monday. Chris Hood says going to be sick as Nick Saban on Tuesday. That's a funny line. Hal Love says this year has been about beating the teams Georgia lost to. Obviously, thinking back to the 2015 Alabama game and the 2012 Alabama game, maybe a new version of revenge tour. Neil Landon Jackson says, I was more worried about Choklahoma than I was Alabama. And, Neil, maybe I was too. I will admit that, I thought Alabama looked pretty good on Monday. I won't deny that. But I'm going to, and for those of you that watch on SEC Country Live, you know that I've been saying this. I think Jalen Hurts gives Georgia a real chance. I think that Vegas is right at the moment. Alabama deserves to be the point spread favorite here. I think Alabama does deserve to be a point spread favorite for a number of reasons. But is this a game that Georgia can win? I absolutely believe that it can win, and I believe the matchup at quarterback, believe it or not, is one of Georgia's potential biggest advantages. There was a great stat. I forgot who had it, but you look at this the success for Jake Fromm. I mean, somebody had this stat, and I would give him credit if I could remember who it was, but he's been 70% or better in every game since the loss to Auburn back in November. That's a quarterback you can trust, not just on the sort of safe, simple throws that Jalen Hurts makes with regularity, but the full repertoire that you ask a quarterback to do. Look at stats for throws 20 yards or more down the field. Jake Fromm is making a whole bunch more of those than what Jalen Hurts is. So on the list of reasons why I think Georgia can win this game, for me, it's Fromm over Hurts as one of those big reasons. Harold Williams asks, is Baker Mayfield humble now? I got to admit, and this is probably inappropriate for me to say, but y'all know that I kind of come from the perspective of a fan here on some of this kind of stuff. I don't like Baker Mayfield at all. There is something about him that just rubs me the wrong way. And I obviously had a great vantage point on Monday for all that, high-stepping celebration stuff, just clown behavior. I thought the build-up during the week with the is he sick, is he not, he's not coming to media day, now he is. I thought all that was just so petty and so middle school drama queenish. I thought it was just unbecoming of a top flight football player, way too soap opera-ish. And I think that you blame all that on Mayfield. This is all a creation of his own doing here. And yeah, Davin Bellamy asking him at the end of the game, or really not asking, commanding him to humble himself. I thought that was very appropriate, and I think that maybe Mayfield does. Georgia fans carrying back a lot of souvenirs. I got my field edition, the same way that you see the players holding up here. I got some roses. I got some confetti. I took a lot of that stuff home from Pasadena. You know what Baker Mayfield's souvenir that he brings home with him from Pasadena? A dose of humility. Then it was the Georgia defense in the second half that gave it to him. Neil Landon Jackson says Mayfield's all about me, even in defeat. It was more about me. Yeah, I mean, listen. Is he a good player? He absolutely is. And is he using some of that emotion to provide a little extra edge for himself? He probably is. And I'll admit what we all know is true. If Baker Mayfield played for Georgia, most of us would feel different about Baker Mayfield. That's just an objective fact. That what Mayfield does, some of his antics would be a little bit more attractive if he was doing those in a Georgia uniform as opposed to the uniform on the other side. That's just a fact. But I do think there's a majority of Georgia fans who'd say, you know what, Georgia does its talking after games. Georgia plays with a little bit of poise, class, and demeanor. I think a lot of Georgia fans do feel pretty good about the team they root for, the behavior that team shows, compared to Baker Mayfield, who's, the Big 12 is a different kind of league. It's more of a, look at me league. It's more of a razzle dazzle. It's more about, there's a phrase that they use in that part of the country about, all sizzle, no steak. Well, there's some steak associated with Baker Mayfield, but there's definitely a lot of sizzle there as well. All hat, no cattle. That's another phrase that gets used in that part of the world. That kind of showmanship just does not get you very far in the SEC because you got guys like Davin Bellamy breathing down your neck. Jeff Galt says, did you see the bulletin board material from Colin Cowherd? Yeah, I did, and I don't think that resonates very much. I mean, it might. I mean, you saw the Alabama player a moment ago use Dabo Swinney's words against him, and Dabo Swinney didn't even say what the guy accused him of saying. So, yeah, these players are looking for every extra edge they can right now. Maybe Georgia is motivated by that. Maybe they need some sort of doubt. I guess that Stephen A. Smith had also said something on ESPN2 that had gotten some attention. So Stephen A. Smith, Colin Cowherd, maybe Georgia's paying attention to this kind of stuff. For the most part, I think people know that those guys are in not just the opinion business, but the outlandish opinion business. That's how you get attention in that world. So maybe Georgia's using that. I don't know that we should be too worried about it, though. Couple more quick comments. We'll get ready to get out of here. Some sports anchors are still doubting Fromm. Are they crazy? If they're still doubting Fromm, they are. Tim Tatum reminds us that Baker Mayfield did track down Jake Fromm and was classy with what he said. My understanding is that is indeed what went down there. Amy Ebb says, can we stop slamming Baker Mayfield? These are college kids we're talking about. They need to grow and learn. He has some growing to do, but we as adults should treat them better. Amy, I don't completely disagree with what you're saying, and that's why I sort of couch what I said about him a moment ago with, it is probably inappropriate for me to admit that I dislike his antics because he is a college kid, and I do think these college guys deserve some grace for what they do on the field and what they do off the field. He's not getting paid the same way that anybody else is not getting paid here. So I don't disagree with your sentiment that these guys deserve sort of a wide breadth in terms of what we are willing to tolerate from them. I would feel that way about Georgia players. I feel that way about Baker Mayfield. So you're not wrong, but human nature is also what it is. And I'm just telling you right now, my human nature is when I see him doing some of the stuff that he was doing on the field, you can't help but want, or at least I seemingly can't help but want to see him get what's coming to him. I mean, that's just, I am who I am. I can't be different than who I am. And there was a sense of satisfaction when Mayfield was hands on his knees looking down at the turf when that game was over. I won't lie about that. Harold Williams asked about the comparison at running backs between Nick Chubb and Damian Harris, and I think it's more than just how those two guys compare with each other. It's actually the overall stable of running backs here, because you may have to use them all. And DeAndre Swift, for instance, who wasn't a big part of the Rose Bowl, he's probably going to be a necessity for Georgia in that national championship game. And then it's like, okay, so you got Swift and Najee Harris, you got Damian Harris, you've got Bo Scarborough, which I never say his last name. I have a hard time saying Scarborough. Is it Scarborough? Scarborough? I can never. That has always been a sneaky tough name for me to pronounce. But nonetheless, that tandem along with Chubb and Michelle, that collection of running backs for both sides is going to be one of the really compelling comparisons. A lot of talk about Baker Mayfield still in the game. Donald Williams about Natrez Patrick. My understanding on Patrick is, apart from any kind of suspension he might be dealing with from Georgia, which I guess by the letter of what Greg McGarity told DawgNation, his issue in Clark County was not a violation of university policy, but my understanding is that he is receiving treatment, and most of these, I'm assuming this is like an inpatient type treatment or something like that. But a lot of these are pretty intensive. They're at least 30 days, if not longer. I mean, your issue with Natrez Patrick, and I think he deserves some anonymity as he goes through whatever it is that he's going through on his way to wellness here. But your issue with Patrick is not a university suspension. It's the treatment that he's getting. And right now what he's getting in terms of treatment, it's more important for his future than being on that field for Georgia. And I think that DawgNation wishes Patrick well as he works to get better here and works to better his life, both in and away from football. Patrick's taking care of something for him right now that's more important than football is. J.C. Howell liked what Davin Bellamy said to Baker Mayfield. Yeah, I liked it too. I have to admit, I did. And as Amy pointed out in the comment section earlier, that's not what we should be thinking, and I'm probably not proud to think that, but I'm also not going to go in here and lie to y'all either. If Mayfield left that stadium with a little extra humility, I'm probably glad about that. Marie Payne says, 38 years since we won a national championship in 1980, and it was 38 years before that. That'll make the difference. Is that right? From 42 to 1980? That's pretty interesting. That's an interesting stat. I hadn't thought about that, Marie. That's pretty cool. Robert Maloney says, I was indifferent towards Baker Mayfield heading into the game, but after seeing the throat slash, the celebrations, him saying we're going to need some help, I grew to dislike him. Yeah, I think a lot of Dog fans probably grew to dislike him pretty quickly because I didn't quite know he was quite so animated. Santiago Diarn mentioning me calling Baker Mayfield out on the field. Yeah, that's probably not my finest moment. Probably not the proudest moment. I'm sure at some point in time we'll pull that up on this show here. We don't have time for it right now, but at some point in time we'll show that. Kevin Jones says, what was it like seeing your Bulldogs win the Rose Bowl BA live? give us poor souls who didn't get to some insight on what the energy was like. So I will tell you, Kevin, and we'll wrap up with this because we're late. We got to go. The one thing I tried to maintain the entire time was a sense of perspective about just how lucky I was to be. And I said this at the end of yesterday's show, and I'll repeat this again. I wouldn't have gotten to go had y'all not tuned into the show this season all year long, last season all year long. You know, y'all have made this be a show that sort of, you know, has a right to exist, for lack of a better phrase, and that gives me a chance to kind of go out and be a part of this Rose Bowl coverage for DawgNation. So I found myself being incredibly grateful for the entire thing. And when Sony Michel scores his game-winning touchdown, I'd actually moved to the field, and I was standing in the corner of the end zone right in front of where Michel run. At some point in time, I want to do kind of a slow motion on the TV image, because I believe if you see Michel kind of run right by the media who's gathered on the sideline, I believe you'll see my fat face at some point in time on the screen if I were able to slow it down long enough. Lorray Snipes talking about the Redcoats being a huge part of the energy. And Lorray, I was where I was standing, not only is it right there in front of where Michel runs in, but it's right in front of the Redcoat band as well. And, you know, it's become so popular, the light up Sanford thing they do during the home games. And Georgia fans did it at Notre Dame. And they play that Krypton fanfare theme at the start of the fourth quarter when the lights come up, and everybody does that with the song. And then before the start of overtime, Georgia did it again. I was able to capture some of that on video. And so, yeah, for me, it was a bucket list experience. And, you know, Kevin in the comment section said, hey, tell us what it was like for those of us who weren't lucky enough to be there. If you weren't lucky enough to get to go there, I hope you found some great friends to watch it with, and I hope that you made a memory no matter where it was you were watching the game. But I hope you also appreciate the fact that I never stopped thinking about how lucky I was to be there, and how there's no guarantee that any kind of college football moment like that will ever unfold for me ever again. So I tried to soak up every minute of it, and I'm going to do the same thing this week as well. Not just for the game on Monday, but what we're doing right now. I mean, think about this, and I know we're late. I promise we're getting off the air here. Think about this for a moment. We are on a cold, bitter January Wednesday on Cloud 9, thinking about a national championship game on Monday. I don't care where you are today. I don't care what kind of work you're doing. That's a pretty good day right there, right? I mean, I look awful. I am exhausted. But Joel Moody says you must have had chills, BA. I had chills then. I've got chills right now. I think I'm going to have chills and goosebumps and a sense of elation. I don't know. It may last for a couple more months because it's certainly not gone away since then. Every time I see one of these Twitter videos that get sent to me, or some of y'all are good enough to sort of share with me your celebrations, I watch them all, and you just couldn't ask for more. You couldn't ask for more. And for a lot of us, I'm 40, some of y'all are older, some of you are younger, but we've all been around enough to have dealt with enough disappointment. And whether even the folks who are significantly younger than me, it seems like we've all been waiting here for a while to have Georgia have a day in the sun here. Well, we're in the midst of it. It's happening. And I don't know how many years it's going to run, but for right now, it is pretty good. So I'm not only looking forward to Monday, I'm looking forward to every day this week and throughout the weekend as we sort of enjoy all of this. So thanks for allowing me to be a part of it with you. Y'all clicking in to watch the show on video or listen to the podcast, it's an awesome thing, man. I really appreciate it. All right, y'all have a great day. I'll be back 10 a.m. tomorrow. I will not be on AT&T SEC Country Live today. I am going to go home and sleep. I'm not going to lie to you. And then I will be back here 10 a.m. tomorrow, and then on SEC Country Live again on Thursday. So y'all have a great day. Let's get ready for a national championship game. We don't have much choice at this point in time, but just to settle in and get ready for this one. We'll talk to you tomorrow.